Hey, my name is Richard Miller. I'm from Suffolk University in Boston, and I'm going to give you a little flash talk on crossing borders, policing bodies. This comes from reading Graham Greene. Graham Greene is an author who did a lot of work over the 20th century in some popular fiction, and I would say we should credit him with opening our eyes to the Cristero War, which was basically a Mexican conflict in the 1920s that doesn't get a lot of presentation in the press or popular imagination, but Greene's work, I think, does save it. And I'm wondering how Greene's work can help us understand similar controversies today. First of all, background on Greene. The Cristero War timeline is over here on the left, as you can see. 1917, the Mexican government made some very anti-clerical laws, and then they finally found a president who came into power to really enforce them, as you can see right here, President Calles in 24. So essentially between 26 and 29 would be the Cristero War, which created such little talk. We did have a collection of short stories by Jose Revolut's God's Land, and then Pedro Paramo, which was a book loosely based on the Cristata, but it didn't really get much traction. So what I'm trying to say is the Mexican literary response, the Mexican imagination was highly sanitized by the Mexican government until 1940 came around, when Greene did a book called The Power and the Glory, which really rips open the Cristero topic for the world to see. And also he had a travel book, a nonfiction book before that he based his Power and the Glory on. So I'm trying to say in this presentation how Greene's travel writing, his nonfiction, informed his fiction, and the fiction has stood the testament of time to this period of Mexican history. Other ways to remember the Cristero War would be some things that happened later at UT Austin. The corridos, the songs of the war, were very informative, very informal literature here. The archives of newspaper photographs. Here's Padre Pio being executed without a trial as well. Even the Cristero War has become 100 years later a little bit more in the imagination of the modern citizen, with big budget Hollywood movies making a claim to promote them, and also even a new Netflix series with that same book, Pedro Paramo, that we saw earlier written about. So multimodal representations are becoming interesting that way. And what I'm trying to say in this presentation is how what Greene opened up is important for us to keep an eye on in terms of our own domestic situations here. In a similar Greene way, we have a nonfiction book, Separated, by Soberoff, that really documents so much more of what's going on with the bias against immigrants, the deportation of people unfairly. This is the nonfiction work, and a fiction work over here, Lost Children Archive, uses a lot of ideas shared between these books here in a more fictional memoir, different kind of fiction way, like Greene's Power and the Glory has worked. Other multimodal ways that have been documenting what's going on today are these great Netflix series, Immigration Nation, so brutal, so authentic with the documentation of what's going on, as well as Separated, which is a film version of Soberoff's book here, as you can see, the children with the foil wraps on. That's a sad scene in American history as well. Also, video games have been part of the archive of documenting against things like ICE raids and immigration, as well as Instagram and other, little visual data streams that come out as well too. We're also seeing the resistance pushing back on Trump coming through the use of mapping, where it's safe and not safe to be places, or the use of where people are coming from to counter disinformation as well too. So all of these sources are vital to creating the historical archive that will document this in the future. We can also look at the treatment of LGBTQ plus in the Trump administration in America, how they've denied them, military members' services, healthcare discrimination, Title IX. The list of discriminations goes on in this factual book by Billiard. But over here in Casey Park's memoir, which uses fiction and nonfiction, it shows a whole different way to understand what's going on with trans and gender conforming communities here and how that works out. Other online places that should be archived and celebrated, like the Boston Gamers, a safe space for people to play online, to become part of the community here, is also an active form of resistance as well. Incredible multimodal archives, like the Digital Transgender Archive, is so rich with resources and will really be a fertile ground for scholarship and memory to accurately document what's been happening here as well. The use of mapping as well seems to be very, very advantageous too, as well, to learn and understand what parts of the country are happening here. You can look at this in the Cristero War as well too, where the parts of Mexico that were and weren't affected by it as well. And then finally, keeping politics in accounting the moves of the administration, I think, is very important, as we're seeing here in the GLAAD Trump tracker in terms of how all these things are happening and how they're documented so they are not forgotten as well. So Green's work on the Cristero War was just one part of the local, national, international documentation of it. And I hope that we've learned from his work with the Cristero War and how much help he brought that issue to being known can be also looked at today with the works of fiction and nonfiction and multimodal sources that will support and prop up, hopefully in 100 years, what we'll think about the Trump administration's treatment of immigrants and LGBTQ plus people so we can accurately project it and reflect it. So with that in mind, I do think Graham Greene, way back in the day, had a really important influence on the Cristero War through a piece of fiction and nonfiction. And I think we're seeing the same thing happen today in different multimodal ways with different issues that are equally as important with immigrants and also LGBTQ plus communities and how they are or are not received. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your comments.